Hi everyone, and welcome to this wonderful discussion on sleep. I'm your host, Sarah Chave, and today we have a wonderful panel who are going to be talking about their top tips on how to get a better night's snooze. So I'm just going to start by getting everyone to introduce yourself and maybe just talk a little bit about your background and what sleep means to you. So I'm going to go around my screen. So I'm going to start with Dr. Pilipovich.
Hi. First off, thanks for organizing this, Sarah. And so my background is I've been studying Chinese medicine for nearly 35 years. I'm a licensed acupuncturist. Started with shiatsu therapy, then went to acupuncture and herbs and so on. But for the last 20 some years, I've been actually not using very many needles and doing more energy balancing, utilizing acupuncture knowledge. And so I'm the co-founder of a healing system called AcuNet, which is the acu in it comes from a reference to acupuncture theory, but it's completely non-invasive and but it's kind of like balancing the meridians without needles in a real nutshell. And then, I mean, I work with clients with all manner of diseases, from immune issues and cancer and fertility issues and headaches and as well as, cognitive issues like, learning disorders and, memory issues and just everything you can imagine. People show up on my clinic door with. But my philosophy is actually the system's pretty good, and so we balance everything with AcuNet, which is what I use in practice. But a lot of whatever is going on for the person is they've got to have strong enough digestion in order to make enough qi out of their food to replenish their reserves. Their body has enough energy to run. And so, balancing, there's a little bit of giving advice on diet, but also trying to balance people's beliefs and attitudes so they can actually do what they're supposed to do, actually make better choices. And the other thing is sleep is crucial. I mean, that is really absolutely crucial. So I always ask, well, how's your sleep and what time do you go to bed and how many hours do you get? And I'm always working at trying to balance them both in terms of, balancing their meridians and all of that so that they can regulate their nervous system, go to sleep, but also with, a lot of people just don't understand how important sleep is. And they're trying to stay up, oh, let me just cross 3 more things off my to-do list, right? And then now it's, midnight and their adrenals have kicked in because they've told their body it's an emergency and you can't go to sleep yet. And, we really have to work on beliefs and attitudes to really do that. But, no matter what they came to me for, I always find I have to work on digestion and I have to work on sleep. It's pretty much universal. So that's my quick introduction.
Thank you, Kaimi. Robito.
Hi, thank you for organizing this. And so I'm Robito Chatwin. And I'd say, first of all, that I teach critical thinking at a UK university now just for the summer. And the rest of the year, I am a hypnotherapist. As far as working at the university goes, I'm interested, obviously teaching critical thinking, in studies and kind of what the studies show. And I've got a personal interest in wellness or health and well-being. So from that perspective, I'm interested in sleep and the benefits of it. As far as from the hypnotherapy angle, my passion is hypnosis, as I would describe it, is the practice of going into the subconscious And so for me, it's brainwave states that are fascinating. And those brainwave states also link into sleep and the different brainwave states that we go into in sleep. So I'm interested in the health benefits of sleep and what the studies show, but also what the mystery and what can happen from going into the different sleep states, which I'll probably get into a bit later.
Amazing, thank you, Robito. Litmus, you're next on my screen.
Okay, yeah, hi, Litmus Freeman. I'm an ex-corporate whore. I used to work in the energy industry for like 20 odd years before I quit and got free and changed my life completely. And since I've been more, I'm in one of my camper vans right now. I lived in a van for 10 years, quite recently. So I was really getting back in sync with nature. And one of the things I'm very much into nowadays is natural cycles, getting in sync with natural cycles. So as well as being a musician and doing a lot of stuff with music, I also do workshops in nature cycles, calendars, solar cycles, lunar cycles, all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, I know from experience how important sleep is, because when I was very stressed out with a busy job, I never used to get enough, and I was probably in the kind of state that Kaimi was talking about, often going to bed too late and not getting enough sleep. But now I do workshops I created a calendar about 12 years ago, which I found aligned very closely with the tropical zodiac in astrology. So that got me into astrology and studying the solar cycles, lunar cycles, etc. So one of the things I find now is that in kind of system matrix time, you know, a lot of us are out of sync with nature. So we're out of sync with the day cycle and we're out of sync with the year cycle. So that's something I talk a lot about in workshops, and that's something I'd like to talk about today.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Dr. Kristin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kristin Reihman. I'm a family physician, board certified in that, and also integrative medicine, working in Eastern Pennsylvania in America. And I think I learned first about sleep from being a mother and having a child who just didn't seem to want to sleep, and just working through all of the tricks and tools that new mothers and dads try to find for themselves when they have a kid who doesn't sleep. And I think one of the most important lessons I learned from that experience, which I now convey to all my patients who don't sleep enough, which is most of them, is that sleep begets more sleep. So putting your child to bed earlier than you think is possible, you know, during that sort of sleepy window when they get a little glazed and that little middle distance look, is actually the right time to put your kid down, not push past that, after which, you know, adrenaline is released and they're sort of flogging themselves to stay awake for whatever excitement you might be producing, is really, really important. And the concept of, you know, different sleep cycles. So adults have sort of a 90-minute cycle. They go through ups and downs. We'll probably get into this. But after 90 minutes, you're in this light stage again. And if you've flogged yourself with adrenaline, you're not going to be able to put yourself back down. You're going to, like, during those light phases, just wake up every 90 minutes. And so really educating patients and family and people about this has been a passion, because about 10 years ago, I experienced a debilitating illness with Lyme disease, and then learned for myself just how important sleep is to immune function and recovery and detoxification. So for me, it's just foundational. I think it's one of the things that people ignore. You know, we've all talked about how people flog themselves and push through it to be able to get things done. And I think we ignore it at our peril. And we can only do it for so long before our body catches up with us or our immune system fails. And it's just one of the things I'm passionate about, teaching people how to do for themselves.
That's incredible. And I love what you're saying about, you know, being a mum and everything. Because I remember with my kids, particularly when they're little, like it's just getting them to sleep before they go into that tantrumy kind of overwhelm place. Um, I'd love to just do a quick round. I'm going to ask you all individual questions because you're coming from really different backgrounds, but I'd love to do a quick round on just the importance of sleep and why, from each of your backgrounds, you believe it being so important. Let's just mix up the order a little bit. So I'm going to start with Robito this time.
Okay, so the importance of sleep. So, well, I'll come at it from the brainwave states. So the beta brainwave state is generally, you know, it's the most active. There's big spikes. It's very rapid, and the beta brainwave state is when we're thinking. Alpha starts to slow down, and that's when we're focusing on a particular object, or when we're kind of relaxing and we're letting go. And then we've got theta, which is also considered the hypnagogic state when we're very connected to the subconscious, and delta is sleep. So when we start to go to sleep, we go from the beta into the alpha. And the alpha is the stage where we know through kind of meditation and things like this, it's very good for reducing stress. So if we can relax into that state, same as if we're in a sauna and we're relaxing in the sauna, we're going into the alpha state, and that's going to reduce stress. There's a reason for that also. There's a part of the brain called the default mode network, which is very active when we're going into the past and the future, when we're thinking, and that shuts down when we go into the alpha. So whether we're focusing on something in the present moment or letting go as we're kind of drifting off into sleep, or in a sauna is kind of comparable to going off to sleep. You're relaxing and that stress is reducing. Then we go down into the theta, where we're more connected to the subconscious. And so that could be that you start to see kind of, you know, images appearing as you're drifting off to sleep. And also that jerk action that we sometimes have when we're going into sleep is called the hypnagogic jerk. And it's actually going into that theta brainwave state. And then we drift off into delta. So the delta brainwave state, as far as I know, and the doctors in here can clarify more if this is not true, but the brain pretty much kind of shuts down its activity, and it's very much a kind of a rebooting time. When we're in delta, the body is shifting files, storing memories into the long-term memory. Immunity is starting to, you know, like the genes, the immune genes start to activate. The brain liquid, I have to write the name, cerebral spinal fluid, kind of opens up in the brain, starts washing away proteins and things like this, which have been linked to Alzheimer's. So there's a whole big kind of operating system cleanup going on when we're in delta. And then when we go into dreaming, REM, we're going back into the theta again. So then we're going back into the part which is considered the hypnagogic state, where we're very connected to emotions. And also it's a kind of an idea generating phase. It's where kind of creativity kicks in as well. So what we're doing in the dream state is we're processing our emotions, and that's super important. And I'll just quickly add, because it's really interesting, that if you look at, for example, meditators who do not, this is kind of a hypothesis that I have, that if you look at meditators that spend a lot of time in the present moment, they're not, you know, they're not negative people, they don't have a lot of worries and concerns. Or even the Pirha tribe, I've learned how to say the name properly, in the Amazon, is a tribe that only has language for the present moment, and they're considered one of the happiest tribes in the world. These people, these types of people, meditators, these tribal members, they don't actually need a lot of sleep. And so my hypothesis is also, because there's a bit of a controversy, or there's a bit of a difference in the studies about how much sleep we actually need to have, is that sleep we potentially need more sleep when we have a very anxious, worrying lifestyle. Obviously, how we live in the Western world or the developed world, there's a constant ongoing kind of fight, flight, freeze, anxiousness going on. So potentially we need less sleep when we have less of that anxiety and worry to deal with. And that's mostly going on in the theta state, the emotion processing.
Thank you, Robito. Fascinating. I'm going to go to Kristin again.
Wow. Well, my mind was just blown by that. That was an excellent overview, and I learned a lot from it. Yeah, yeah. It almost makes you wonder if those meditators in that tribe are kind of almost like using some of their sleep time during the day, you know, with their theta state that sort of percolates throughout, so they don't need as much at night. Yeah, so the people I see are mostly people with very complex, chronic, debilitating illnesses like Lyme disease, often called fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue. I see a lot of kids with autism. And one of the things that I talk about a lot with my patients is the terrain and the importance of making sure the terrain is healthy, as opposed to the bug they might have or the bug they might get. You know, how many heavy metals they're sort of soaking in, and how little sleep or much sleep they're getting, and what other infections are there that are active, and what foods they're eating. I mean, these are all so crucial. And sleep is one of the places where the body sorts a lot of that stuff out. I mean, as you talked about, there's a lot of cerebral spinal fluid movement, and the glymphatic system is active, which is this whole lymph system of the brain that is pulling out toxins in the night, but not if you're not sleeping. I also have not a license, but training in Chinese medicine and in acupuncture, medical acupuncture, I should say. And one of the things I've learned from that is how each organ has a couple of hours during the 24-hour cycle in which they're very active, and that some major detoxification is happening at night when the liver and gallbladder are active. And so people who aren't sleeping during those times and who are challenging their body in other ways by being awake or by the adrenaline response because they're trying to stay awake or multitasking, they're not giving those organs the important time they need and energy they need to flow and really reboot the system. I like to tell people that the hours before midnight are worth double the hours after midnight in terms of quality sleep. And I don't know if there's science behind that. I just know from personal experience and with many, many patients, they just don't get rejuvenating sleep. You know, I feel like in some ways I'm a peddler of inconvenient truths. I think we probably all feel that way when we're talking about sleep, because nobody wants to hear that they're sleep deprived. But the bottom line is, if you're using an alarm of any kind, you're not getting the sleep you need. You know, the body will sleep until it's done sleeping. And maybe it's 10 hours you need because you're fighting off an infection or because you're a teenager and you're overly stressed, but it is what it is, right? And the body needs what it needs, even if it's not convenient.
That's incredible. Thank you, Kristin. And I'm actually going to go to Kaimi next, because I know that you can talk to the hours before midnight and the you know, what Kristin brought up about the value of the hours before midnight from a Chinese medicine point of view.
Yeah, Kristin, I love that you talked about the hours before midnight counting for two, because that is kind of like a principle of Chinese medicine, and it goes into the natural cycles of the body. Now, we've studied that a little bit from Western medicine, but not very well, kind of in its infancy. We do know that even from Western medicine that the parasympathetic nervous system, that's the rest, digest, and heal part of the nervous system, as opposed to the fight or flight, that wants to be active between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is the peak of that time. Well, you know what? That totally matches the wisdom from Chinese medicine and from Ayurveda, which is that your sleep should be symmetric around midnight. And the reason for that is in Chinese medicine, we're concerned with balancing yin and yang. These are like fundamental forces, which is a little bit foreign to the Western mind, but yin is cooling, moistening, and calming energy. And so if you don't have enough yin, then the mind is too active and it's hard to go to sleep. And so, you know, that old saying, it takes money to make money. You recharge your yin by sleeping. And so I love you said the sleep begets more sleep, right? Is that people don't want to take an afternoon nap when they're tired because they're thinking, oh, but then I'll be up. No, you need to build up your yin, that calming, cooling energy. And it is literally cooling. The brain has to lower in temperature for you to fall into sleep. There's good studies on this, that the brain temperature has to fall in order for you to actually go to sleep. And so these poetic sounding descriptions of Chinese medicine of, oh, you need the yin energy to subdue the mind. It actually makes good physiological sense when you do that. But the idea that there are particular times when you should be active and particular times when you should be eating, like in the morning, is when the stomach energy is strongest. So if we've had a good night's sleep and then we're up in time to actually be hungry for breakfast, then that's the best time to have a big meal. In the evening, when most people have their big meal of the day, the stomach meridian is at its absolute weakest for the whole day. And so then you stuff this great big meal in, and your stomach's like, really? And then you're trying to go to bed, but your stomach wants to try to work on that food that you just ate. And that activity is stirring the mind. And so, part of sleep hygiene is to not have such a big dinner, don't eat late, and start winding down, because at 7 to 9 in the evening is when the pericardium or spirit protector meridian is most active. And that's when we should be, okay, the day is done. I'm going to say my prayers or meditate, but to have some action of turning over the day to higher power and start winding down, because at 9 to 11 the triple heater meridian is active, and that controls the endocrine system. So if you're still like charging away on your to-do list at about 9:30, guess what? You get this massive adrenal release. And then, like Kristin was saying, with the 90-minute sleep cycle, right? You get to the end of that cycle. If you got adrenaline coursing through your system still, you are going to wake up. And, but it actually makes sense with these traditional observations of the rhythms of the body. And then the wood element, which is the liver and gallbladder, from, basically 11 to 3 in the morning, that's charged with synthesizing wisdom out of our day. And so the thing that Robito was talking about of, getting into the theta sleep where we can process the emotions, the ideal time for that to happen is between 11 and 3. If we're up watching Netflix till 2:30, guess what? We just missed the optimum time to get into theta sleep, to actually process our emotions and synthesize wisdom out of it. So, this whole idea of living in harmony with our cycles is huge. And, fortunately, people figured this out thousands of years ago. We don't have to figure it out from scratch, but yeah, that's just one more thing. I work with a lot of people with immune issues, and there might be autoimmune. I work with a lot of people with cancer, and I work alongside the Western cancer treatments. But inflammation is a huge risk factor for cancer and lots of other diseases. Our body manages inflammation when we're asleep. Countering inflammation is yin. You need to have ample yin energy to overcome the inflammation that develops during the day. And so to do that, you have to sleep, and you have to sleep at the right time. And and it is, depending what's going on, people who meditate have less need for emotional processing, and they might need less sleep, right? That I totally agree with that hypothesis, that it's a possibility there. But like some of the greatest athletes like Roger Federer, who one of the greatest all-time tennis players, and Usain Bolt and so on. They, when they were competing, slept 12 hours a day, 10 hours at night, and a 2-hour nap in the afternoon. Every record that Usain Bolt set was a half hour after his afternoon nap. But if you're training that hard, your body's building up all kinds of inflammation, and you need more sleep to counteract it. And you know, we don't get enough sleep, and it is, we get far less sleep now than we did 40 years ago.
Thank you, Kayumi. And it's very interesting to, you know, hear those, you know, cycles from a Chinese medicine point of view. Litmus, I'm be interested for you to talk about natural sleep cycles, because perhaps you have a very different angle on it, you know, with the connections to nature and those sides of things. So be really interested to hear that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I really couldn't agree more about the eating times that Kayumi's talking about. Because from my experience, I definitely sleep better when I don't eat much at all in the evening. Have a lighter, like a snack or something in the evening. And when I mean, my favorite meal of the day is lunch for sure. Or yeah, a good breakfast, you know. And I also have an autoimmune inflammatory condition called sarcoidosis, which I was diagnosed with about 5 years ago. And the first thing the doctor told me was the best thing for this condition is lots of really good quality sleep. So I can definitely agree with that, what you were saying earlier there. But you know that when we're talking about the times that we do things, the thing that always gets me is like, what time are we talking about? Because if you think about the natural solar cycle, you know, what would be sundial time, which is how clocks originated from, sundials. You know, the time of day is based on where the sun is and the earth in relation to it. So when we're talking about midnight and, you know, 2 to 3 in the morning or whatever, you know, what does that mean? Because are we talking real solar time, which I understand our circadian rhythms of our body are in tune with, or are we talking about the clock time? Because, you know, and if we're talking about clock time, which I guess most people are generally, you know, what time zone are you in? Is that the right time zone? What happens with summertime when we change an hour? So if you were trying to go to bed before midnight, you know, yesterday, and now the clock's changed by an hour, what do? Do you move it to 11, or, you know what? And this is something that's rarely talked about. I've been on quite a few sessions related to health and maybe mental health and psychological issues and physical health and Chinese medicine, very much from an amateur point of view, but they all talk about, you know, you should do this at this time and this at this time. But, you know, I know, like right now here in Portugal, where I am, the real time that my body's in tune with, based on the sun, is an hour and a half different to what the clock says. So, you know, real solar noon, midday, the real midday, is at 1:30 on the clock PM. And the same applies to midnight. So I would love to hear your views, all you guys, about that, you know, and what should people do when the clocks change. I mean, you may be aware that the EU, for example, has already agreed a few years ago to get rid of daylight savings time clock changes. And then it was postponed because of the whole COVID thing. But they're still talking about doing that, and then letting countries choose the time zone they want. For me, it would be great if we all actually, if we're going to have a time zone, let's have the one that's actually closest to where the sun is, you know. Because, you know, for example, if you're in Galicia in the north of Spain in the summer, you know, when you're going to be almost 3 2.5 to 3 hours different on the clock to where the sun is. And people who, you know, I've been there, and people who live there complain about this a lot, and they wish that they were on a completely different time zone. So I would love to hear you guys' views on that.
Thank you, and everyone can just keep that in mind. I'm going to ask you each specific questions now, but if you want to speak to, you know, what Robito's been talking about, daylight savings and things, then please do answer that as well. I'm actually just going to go around in the same order again, I think. So, Robito, I'm just going to ask you a little bit more about the brainwave states and the benefits of them, and maybe you can just talk a little bit more about the dream state as well, and perhaps different messages that you can get and that kind of thing when you're in the dream state.
Before I do that, I'll share my bit of knowledge linked to what Litmus was just talking about, which is studies that have been done on the daylight saving time and the change. And when you lose 1 hour of sleep, there's a massive increase in heart attacks the next day. There's a massive increase in suicide. There's a massive increase in traffic accidents. So, and when we're talking about a massive increase, I mean kind of 25% increase in heart attacks. And then you see more or less the opposite, about kind of like a 21% reduction in heart attacks when the clocks change again. And I don't have the answers to what exactly all is everything that's happening when that happens, but it just shows how important it is for us to the time then we wake up, the routine of going to sleep at the same time. And as Litmus was saying, I mean, I'm interested in finding out more. And maybe Litmus, when you speak again, if you have the opportunity, you could explain how we could sync ourselves. You said there's apps and things that you can get. But so yeah, so there's a massive thing there. As far as the going into the theta, so it's interesting that we spend about a fifth of the time sleeping in the delta, which is the deep sleep, the recovery of the body and the biological processes and all of that. And then we spend about half of our time in REM, in rapid eye movement dream state, where we're actually doing all the processing. The interesting thing about being in the theta is that if you are asleep, it's a bit like if you're doing meditation and you go down into the theta and you have some kind of kundalini experience, awakening vision experience, that's totally out of your control because you're meditating. It's the same when you're asleep, you're doing the same thing, but it's all happening for you. So you're in the dream, you're asleep, you're having those dreams, and then you wake up in the morning. So I'd say quickly that those dreams could potentially have very important messages for people because it's happening while you're processing emotions. And then also, instead of meditation, if you do hypnosis, then you can guide somebody through that state to explore different things that you might want to be working through emotionally. And if you go to sleep in that state, of course, there's lucid dreaming, and it's actually not that difficult to train yourself to do it, so that you can actually know that you're asleep and you can actually guide yourself. You can make choices as you're going through that theta emotional processing.
Thank you, Robito. It's all incredibly fascinating stuff. So Kristin, I'm going to go to you, and I'd like to dive deeper into that detoxing and rejuvenation that happens when we sleep, and you know, perhaps any nutritional support for, you know, getting better sleep and supporting that process, and perhaps you know, what to avoid, you know, what kind of foods to avoid that might interfere with the sleep.
So great question. I first want to also address the question that was asked earlier about cycles. So I have some patients who are third shift workers, meaning they're working all night long. And so it's always sort of demoralizing to tell someone you have no opportunity for the optimal hours of sleep and detoxification. And so I think one of the things I'm very pragmatic as a person, and this will also play into the rest of my answer for your question, but I think you need to find out what works for you and what you're able to do sustainably. And so if you can't sleep during those crucial hours, just know that sleep is still crucial whenever you can get it. Like, I'm really fascinated, Robito, by this concept of like sneaky naps through meditation. I feel like this might be the answer for people, is if they can't sleep at the right times, at least they can extend their theta experience and get little samplings of it during the day with some meditation. So I love this idea. But a lot of detoxification happens during the day too. The liver is on point 24/7 doing its stuff. And it's sort of the workhorse of detoxification, moving chemicals and molecules that the body makes or that the body ingests or that you're infected with through a series of enzymatic processes to break them down into first more inflammatory molecules, but then quickly into less inflammatory ones. And then you pee them out, or you poop them out, or you sweat them out, or you breathe them out. And if you're not getting sleep, none of those enzymes are working as well. None of those processes have the energy they need to do this well. So it's not just that the brain detoxifies when you're sleeping, but sleep allows your body to get the restorative detoxification it needs so that it can do its job all those other hours. So, tips I have for people about this are: go to bed at a time, like on a weekend when you don't have to get up, or if you work weekends, pick a day where you don't have to get up the next day, and close the blinds, make it really dark. Don't tell everyone not to touch you. Don't have your phone in your room. I mean, not having your phone in your room is also a first step to not being distracted and losing sleep. But, make sure you're uninterrupted, and go to bed and see how long you sleep. See how long your body needs. And then at the morning, do the math, and that's the number you should try for every night. So if you have to get up at 6 a.m. for something, or regularly, go to bed in enough hours that you can actually get those hours of sleep before your body wakes naturally on its own. I really like to wean people off their alarm clocks. And an alarm clock can be, your dog licking your face because your dog sleeps with you, or your mom coming in and waking you up for school in the morning. Those are all alarm clocks. But I really like to wean people off of any kind of alarm clock and teach them about what their body needs. When I had Lyme, I was sleeping 12 hours a night, which means I went to bed at 6:30 in order to get up for work in the morning. And I was exhausted still, but I at least woke up on my own, So needing different amounts of sleep doesn't make you, weak or a needy person or a lazy person. It means at this phase in your life, this is the sleep you need. And if you've spent many, many years denying yourself the appropriate amount of sleep, sleep debt is cumulative. It's not like if you miss an hour every night for a month, you're an hour behind. No, you're like 30 hours behind. So you have to catch up on that incrementally. And I think people, again, this is like what Kaimi was talking about in the beginning about mindset shifts. I love that, because people don't understand or recognize the importance of this. And it sometimes takes a lot of, maybe setting people to Kaimi is what I need to do to get them to change their mind about this, because people don't want to believe it. They don't want to hear it. It's like life. There's too many things in my life. I don't want to miss out. And so I think really driving this home and doing that little sleep experiment can be one way that people do that. So to your question about nutrition, everyone is different. And I really love, this is one of the reasons I love elimination diets, because people can learn through a quick process, 21 days, after they heal their body by eliminating inflammatory foods and adding them back then over a period of 3 or 4 weeks, they can learn what foods for them create trouble falling asleep, or create insomnia in the middle of the night, or make them jittery during the day, or bring on symptoms that keep them up at night. So, everyone's diet is a little bit different. I do agree that heavy meals in the evening can make it really hard for the body to fall asleep for all the reasons that have been mentioned. And yet for some people, that's when they have to eat their big meal. So I really tailor it to the person in front of me and try to give them hope that they can find a way to optimize their sleep, even if they're not sleeping at the perfect time or eating at the perfect time, or, eating foods that are optimal. We can try to work with people where they are.
Thank you for all those wonderful tips, Kristin. That's incredibly insightful. Kaimi, I realise there may be a little bit of overlap between you and Dr. Kristin, because there's but I think you complement each other really nicely. So I'm actually going to dive into the value for the immune system and for inflammation in the body, if you can dive a little bit deeper with that. And also the insomnia aspect from a Chinese medicine point of view, perhaps what's indicated, what imbalances might be indicated if people are having trouble sleeping.
Right. Yeah, I can dive into that. I did find Litmus's question about the daylight savings time. I think it is a real issue. And I lived for many years in Hawaii where we don't change the clock, and I thought that was much more civilized. But it's hard for us to change our governments, and then we have to live with the rest of society. We have to kind of, work with what's going on around us. But if people started to really listen to that thing that both Kristin and I have said is, hey, the hours of sleep before midnight are worth double the hours afterwards. If you were getting your sleep early enough, then you're going to be, waking up before you need to go to work, whether you're on regular time or daylight savings time, and actually shooting towards getting that sleep at least more symmetric around midnight actually sort of protects you a little bit from, public policy errors, in my views. And so just to put my 2 cents in there, because again, it's so hard to change people's minds about the value of sleeping early, because we have electric lights and we have TVs and we have Netflix. And so we can do anything we want at any time of day. Doesn't mean we should. We should follow old rhythms of, oh, look, the sun's down, it's dark, let's go to bed, right? So it's, it's that kind of common sense. Now, in terms of the immune system, I really focus on the immune system a lot because it's central to everything. Healthy immune system helps to regulate your microbiome and how strong your digestion is and how much nutrients you're actually absorbing out of your food. Most people have terrible digestion, even if they have a good diet, and they're not really absorbing nutrients. And so managing and balancing the immune system, you got to do that if you're going to have strong digestion and good absorption. Virtually every other disease you can name has inflammation, which is an immune response, as an underlying factor. You look at heart disease, and underlying that is inflammation. The biggest trigger for acute trigger for a heart attack is inflammation. And we think of it as, arteries getting built up with plaque and so on, but like the artery doesn't go from 30% occluded to shut off with one more bit of plaque on it. But if there's inflammation and it swells, boom, now the coronary artery is shut off and you have a heart attack. So managing inflammation, if you did that, you get rid of a lot of heart disease. Arthritis goes without saying, that's inflammation. Dementia is inflammation. In most nervous system disorders are actually inflammation of the nervous system. And so look, you could start with a list of diseases, and you probably go a long ways down the list before you found one that doesn't have inflammation as a key thing. You don't really fight inflammation when you're awake. You do it when you're asleep. And you know what? Here's a way to, I think, rather than trying to quote off the top of my head medical studies on that, this whole idea of yin and yang in Chinese medicine is a great way to visualize it. Yang is active and warming. Yin is quiescent and cooling. So if you're being active, you're warming. You run in place, you're generating heat. Anytime you're active, you're generating heat and inflammation. Even eating a meal causes inflammation. And so postprandial inflammation is what it's called. So look, that's why you don't want to eat a big meal at night, because if you can avoid it, if you can manage to rearrange your schedule and eat a bigger lunch or something like that, because now you're going into sleep time with postprandial inflammation, and the idea of when people try to fall asleep, but their mind is just going like this, in Chinese medicine, that's stomach heat. And well, that kind of sounds like postprandial inflammation, doesn't it? Right? So, you know, you can cure a lot of that kind of insomnia by convincing somebody, if you can, that it's important to eat a good breakfast and lunch and have a light meal for dinner, because now they don't have that postprandial inflammation going into sleep hours. You know, that's a big cause of insomnia. There's the other thing, which is when people that can kind of fall asleep, but then they keep waking up. Well, a lot of times that's a blood deficiency. So blood is yin largely, because it's largely water. And the imagery in Chinese medicine is that you have to have enough blood for the mind to submerge into the blood and become quiescent. Basically, you need enough yin stuff in the body to combat the yang activity of the mind. And so if you don't have good quality blood, then it's a bit like you go to bed and somebody's made your bed, but they short sheeted you and you're trying to pull the covers up and it just won't get quite high enough to make you feel cozy and comfortable, kind of thing, right? So now you're active. So that's a big reason why people can't stay asleep, you know, in addition to the adrenal thing that we talked about. The other thing is that if people overdo and overdo and overdo because, you know, we think somehow, you know, we're better people or God will love us more if we work harder or something like that, right? You know, Protestant work ethic, is that we spend our qi reserves, which is stored in the kidneys. And the kidneys regulate the urinary sphincter. If you have strong kidney qi, you sleep through the night without having to wake up to go to the toilet. If you have weak kidney qi, you have to get up and go to the toilet 2-3 times a night. And now you're up and it's hard to fall back asleep. And so, you know, I mean, those are some of the big ones that I end up seeing over and over with people that, you know, we can actually work on. You know, and one of the ways to work on it is, I mean, I give people a little bit of advice, but in terms of balancing the ability to make good blood, balancing the digestion, balancing the kidney qi, I do Acunex balancing. And so, Sarah, you teach the Acunex self-care routine.
Yeah, it's wonderful, isn't it?
I put my kid to sleep with Acunex self-care,
me too.
which is a quick routine to balance all the meridians in like 3 minutes or whatever. And it's just like, it just sets them up for sleep, basically. And then doing full Acunex sessions gives a chance to balance everything, including, you know, those beliefs about I'm not trying hard enough or something like that, right? So, and you know, that starts to hit all of the pieces of getting people to value sleep and change their energy patterns so that they can. I hope I didn't talk too long. I know
No,
that
not
was
at all. Thank you,
fine.
Kayi. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So it is Litmus's time to talk, but I'm not sure if he's coming back. He's obviously having internet issues. So we're just going to do another round, and if he comes back, he can kind of have extra time to talk. So I just wanted to finish up by just opening it up for anything that perhaps you haven't had the opportunity to cover yet that you'd like to talk about. We'll just do one more round, and also to give you the opportunity to let people know how they can get in contact with you. So Robito, we'll go to you again.
Okay, so what I would like to say is I'm really interested in intuition. So coming into the present moment and focusing on the intuition, and then also the balance between being and doing. And the reason that I want to mention both of those is because Kristin was talking about, you know, not setting the clock, intuitive sleeping what you actually need, and what you need can be different for different people. And I think ultimately when we can connect to our intuition, that's all we need to know. And so I would say that when it comes to, I mentioned earlier that there's quite a lot of discussion around how many hours of sleep do we actually need, whether it's 6, whether it's 8. I would say that as far as how much sleep do we need, then yeah, follow our own intuition and just feel what works for us. Don't set an alarm, and go to bed at a regular time. Also extremely important, having that routine. And then with the being and the doing, that then comes to Kaimi and what he was saying is, I absolutely agree that sleep, or let's say lack of sleep is a cause of all-cause mortality. And sleep is a life support system, and it's a biological and an emotional necessity. And when we go into delta sleep, which is the body the inflammation that Kaimi was talking about, you know, there's also a fantastic talk, a TED talk by Matt Walker, who is a professor at UC Berkeley, called something like Sleep is a Superpower. And he talks about the natural killer cells. So the natural killer cells are released and they clear out everything that we don't need to have in, you know, it clears out what we don't need. And if we have a lack of sleep or sleep deprivation, that's reduced, the natural killer cell release is reduced by about 70%. I mentioned how there's, you know, genes associated with immunity are kind of active when we get a good sleep. Genes associated with inflammation are active when we don't sleep. So I would say that sleep is, I agree totally, that sleep is absolutely a necessity, and we should all be getting it. And you know, it's not an optional extra. It's part of being biologically and emotionally healthy. And I also agree that inflammation is the biggest cause of, yeah, pretty much any disease that we could come up with. How to find me? If you go to robito.info, that will take you straight to my link tree. That will direct you to my hypnosis if you're interested, also to the Conscious People's Network on Telegram, and also to my podcast that I do with everyday ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Robito. We're going to go to Litmus. We're on the final rounds, Litmus. But I just wanted to, we're going to backtrack a bit because everyone's just doing a bit of a roundup for anything else that they would like to say that they didn't get the opportunity. So please add that to the questions that I asked, and also how people can get in contact with you. But can you talk a little bit more about the night and day cycles? And, you know, if they're, from your perspective, because I realise it might be different to the other people, you know, if there are good times and not so good times to sleep.
Yeah. So what I was really trying to say earlier was about how the changes in the clock times affect us, and the time zones and where we are. Now, sorry, you might have noticed my data dropped out for a bit there, and I missed what Kaimi was saying in answer to that. So forgive me if I repeat anything, but yeah, you know, the night and day cycle obviously changes throughout the year. And on the equinoxes, twice a year, we get 12 hours a day and 12 hours a night. But, you know, for example, where I am, that can change then from between the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So the sun will rise an hour and a half earlier and set an hour and a half later than the equinox on the summer. So that obviously kind of makes a difference to how you're feeling about, you know, how much light there is, and the circadian rhythms in your body in tune with that. how much you feel like you need to sleep or not. So, you know, when there's more light, it's harder to sleep, but certainly in the winter half of the year, we really want to have more sleep. So, but as well as that change over the year, you know, the thing, as I say, that really affects it a lot is the time zone you're in and the clock changes. So what I found helped me personally is I have a clock. I have 2 clocks actually set to real time, so solar time, you know, which would effectively be sundial time. So it's what they call local apparent solar time, and you can find out, you can use a little app for this called Solar Time Free, which wherever you are, it tells you what the real time by the sun is rather than what's on the clock. Obviously, when you have to interact with the matrix, you need to know what the clock time is, particularly if shops close and things like that. But personally, I found, you know, the hour change twice a year doesn't affect me at all, because the time's still the same for me on that, because I'm following the solar time, so that it doesn't change, you know, so it doesn't affect my sleep. And I found that really, since I've been doing that, I found that really helpful. So, you know, I'd encourage everyone to check that out, and to look at, you can go on a website called timeanddate.com, and it'll show you all the sunrise and sunset times for wherever you are in the world. And it's really interesting. If you look at on that website, if you look at that data, it'll tell you when solar noon is, which is obviously the real midday. And you can tell from the difference from whatever time it says on the clock where you are and 12 o'clock, you can tell what your difference in time is between the sun and your clock. So you can tell how out of sync you are with the day cycle. You know, and it's, having lived in a van for 10 years or so, and not having, you know, as you may have noticed earlier, not always having things like mobile data, Wi-Fi consistently, and power and stuff like that. You know, you tend to go to sleep and get up much more with the natural cycle. You know, when it gets dark, an hour or so after it gets dark, you're really yawning, ready for bed, you know. So I found I slept much better in the van, you know, out in, usually parked out in nature somewhere, than I did in a house in a town in the matrix, if you like, if you want to call it that. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone to check out solar time and the changes in the light and day cycle between the equinoxes and the solstices, and to get back in sync with nature in terms of you know, when, for example, when you celebrate New Year and things like that, because all our ancestors always used to start the year at the spring equinox, you know, because we start the cycle in a state of balance between day and night, and it helps keep us in a state of balance. So that's another thing I do. And yeah, check out Solar Time Free, so you know wherever you are what the solar time is, because that's what your body's going to be in tune with. And you know, when you're looking at the best times to do things, maybe if you look at the time on the sun rather than the time on the clock, you may find that works a lot better for you. I'd be interested to know what the other guys' opinions are on that. But is there anything I missed there in answer to your questions that you may have asked earlier?
Just a roundup in terms of, because you'd mentioned you did classes in Portugal, is that right? You do about this topic. Did I hear that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so I'm in Portugal also, and a lot of people that will be listening to this are in Portugal. So maybe just let us know how they can get in contact with you if you're doing some local classes.
Okay, yeah. Well, my main website is litmusafreeman.net. So you can see all my sites there.
Say it again.
So it's Litmus. The main website is litmusafreeman.net. And on there, you'll see links to my other sites. So my music, Project Freeman, about getting out of the system. My calendar, websites about getting back in sync with the natural cycle of the zodiac. Yeah, and a thing called wisdom workouts. So you can get me to come along and do a wisdom workout if you want. And we start with the big cycles and home right down into the smaller cycles all the way down to the day cycles. So they're fun workshops. Hopefully that covers it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Kristin, any last thoughts?
Well, my last thought is that my mind is blown by all that litmus. I'm always grateful to be in a group of thoughtful people, intentional humans who are trying new things and learning new things and forging their paths. And this is something I've never heard of before. But what better way to connect yourself to something larger than yourself than to sync your rhythms with the sun? I mean, it's beautiful. So thanks for sharing that. So I was just recently working in Amish country in Eastern Pennsylvania, where I travel to several times a year to see families of kids with neurological injury. And one of the things that is always so refreshing about being there is that nobody has a cell phone, nobody has alarm clocks, nobody has light after the sun goes down. And there's virtually zero sleep issues among the Amish. There's a lot of other things going on, but sleep is not something that people suffer with. They get their sleep, that as soon as the sun goes down, as soon as we do this, melatonin starts squeaking out of our pineal glands. And so I think of us as flogging ourselves awake every night. After dinner, when the sun's going down, we should not be sitting under bright lights. We should not be looking at our phones and our screens and our television. I know that's when most people do a lot of that stuff, but it doesn't make it good. It doesn't make it healthy or helpful for getting good sleep. So I always come back from Amish country really recommitted and re-inspired in my own household to kind of living more closely with the natural rhythms of the sun, because it makes a difference. It just does. And I just would encourage anyone listening to this to consider the experiment of getting more sleep. Consider the experiment of not getting your phone out after dinner. Consider the experiment of not using an alarm clock. You don't have to do it forever, but try it. And if you notice the next day, after getting 3 more hours of sleep a night than you are normally getting, you feel groggy and tired, that doesn't mean it was a bad thing. It means you need even more sleep. One of the things I remember from being super sleep deprived as a new mom and a resident or a medical student first, and then with other kids as a resident, and not getting nearly the sleep I needed, was that I became able to function at this, I liked to think of it as 90%. It was probably more like 60% of optimum, but I was sort of percolating along at this lower level of function and feeling pretty okay about it for years. And when I started getting sleep because I needed to, because the Lyme disease demanded that I learn how to sleep again, I realized that there was a lot of catch up I had to do, a lot of missed sleep that I needed to make up for. And eventually I got to a place where I couldn't tolerate missing a night of sleep anymore, because my body had learned, we know what we like here. My cells knew what they wanted and my brain knew what it wanted. It's kind of like when you go off gluten and then when you go back on it, you're like, that didn't feel good. Why did I ever go off it? Well, because it was never good for you. And now your body is cleaner and healthier and less inflamed, and it can see the difference when you put something inflammatory in. Your body can tell once you start getting really good sleep when you're not getting enough sleep. So don't take the first few nights of being groggy as a message that somehow sleep is bad for you, or that you're lazy, or that you'll never get enough sleep. No, you just need to catch up. And once you catch up, it's possible to feel awesome a lot more than you were before when you're getting good sleep. So that's my final 2 cents.
Fabulous. And how can people get in contact with you, Dr. Kristin? Because you're doing some amazing stuff. I don't know if you just want to talk briefly about the Family Hope Center and all the stuff you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm the medical director and nutrition consultant for the Family Hope Center in Norristown, Pennsylvania, which is an international family-run business optimizing children's brains. So we travel all over the world, or we did before COVID. We're doing a little bit more. Mostly we travel to Amish country right now, but we used to travel to 5 countries a year, teaching a 3-day conference for parents helping them learn how neuroplasticity is possible and teaching them the tools to both assess their children's brains and where the brains needed some input, and also to how to put those inputs in at home. And we see amazing things. I mean, we see kids who have a neurological age that's half their chronological age coming back every 6 months, making not only 6 months of neurological gains, but 18 months, sometimes 24 months of neurological progress. So that's really, really amazing. And a foundation of the nutrition program is, no surprise, sleep. So I try to encourage people to think of sleep as part of their nutrition. It's how the brain gets energy. So that's one of the things I do. And you can learn more about that at thefamilyhopecenter.com. I also have an online membership and a podcast where I have wellness seekers who gather every week, and we talk about things like this and interview people like you guys. So if anybody wants to be a guest on the podcast or in the Healing Grove, I would love to have all of you there. Sarah's been there, was a huge hit. So I just love sharing tools. I feel like I'm a collector of tools that work. People can find all my things at Linktree under Kristin Reihman, MD.
Thank you so much, Kristin. You're doing some incredible work. Kaimi, any last thoughts?
Well, you know what? I think this has been fascinating to hear these different perspectives, and which I just really agree with everything everybody said, but it's interesting to see it from like different angles, and I like that because it really fleshes it out. And I hope this roundtable helps people understand the importance of sleep and of honoring rhythms. We're not meant to just have arbitrary rhythms. And and like I've worked a graveyard shift before in the past, and I have full sympathy for the people who have to do that. But most people don't work graveyard shift, and they have some leeway to make these changes, and so I hope that helps to motivate people. I think the last thing that I want to say, though, is that the advice around sleep hygiene, turning off the screens, winding down, going to bed early, that's great. But again, it's hard for people to follow advice if they're out of balance. And so I'm just a huge believer in doing energy balancing to balance your system. And then there's a few levels of that. I mentioned the Acunex self-care course, which Sarah, you teach, and some other people teach. But like, once people learn that, it's literally 3 minutes to do a general balancing on your nervous system and to balance your meridians. And it really helps you get back to a place of balance where you think clearer and make better decisions. And then for fuller addressing things and getting to the actual beliefs and a lot of times emotional traumas that people have from the past, that they're carrying around, this emotional baggage from traumas and so on. That's part of what's keeping them from sleeping. And because they're not sleeping, they're not clearing it in the deep sleep state, right? So, we can do energy balancing to help to release those things, not with counseling, but just letting go energetically of the pattern of imbalance that's associated with that trauma, it's such an amazing thing to see it work quickly. We have lots of psychotherapists who do Acunex because it's so fast, right? So the idea that, for somebody to know that there's something that could help balance them on all levels for, all kinds of conditions, not just sleep, but sleep is foundational. And that, for anybody who's listening to who's a practitioner, I mean, they should consider studying Acunex. And to find me or to find out more about Acunex, if you go to acunex.com, and I don't know if our little names show up in the recording here. I've got it on the screen there, but if it's not showing up in the recording, it's ACCUNECT.com. And if you go there, you can get in touch with us. You can find out more about studying Acunex, learning Acunex self-care, learning the Acunex system, finding a practitioner, to work with you, and so on. that would be a starting point. And just one last little plug. I realize this won't actually be posted till next week, but I'm doing one of our regular AccuNect community calls tomorrow, actually, and on spiritual connection and health, which is like that concept is integrated throughout the whole AccuNect system, basically. And so I'm running a webinar on that, and I'll be doing a healing session for everybody on the call. Now, it will be recorded. So I've got on the homepage at AccuNect.com, I've got right at the top a place to sign up for the webinar, but I'll leave it up, but change the button to like sign me up to get the recording, afterwards. So by the time people listen to this, they can go there, and that would give them a much fuller idea of what AccuNect is, what it can do, and why people who either practice it and teach it like I do, or who studied it like Sarah did and got so excited about it, she said, I have to teach it, why we get so passionate about it, because it's just so good to synthesize all of the different wisdom that we have from all these sources. So
thank you, Kaimi. And if anyone has trouble finding you on your website, I believe you're also on the People's Health Alliance website as an affiliate. AccuNect is there and under affiliate. And
okay.
If anybody wants to contact me also, I forgot to say at the beginning, I'm an international ambassador for the People's Health Alliance. So you can find me under the international ambassadors if you'd like to find out more about the self-care that Kaimi's been talking about. It's been absolutely fascinating, guys. I've learned so much, and I'm Kristin, I'm definitely going to take up your challenge. I don't have an alarm clock, so I've got that half, but I do have a screen after dinner, so I'm going to try and cut that one out and see how we go. So thank you so much, everyone, and thank you everyone for listening. Also, it's been a really fabulous discussion. Bye for now.
Thanks all.
Thank you.